and I will be moderating today's inaugural session. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the online course on urban futures in South and Southeast Asia, a space for critical reflection on the region's rapidly transforming cities and urban lives. We have with us today Dr. Samaddar and Dr. Priya Singh, the course coordinators on behalf of CRG and AIT respectively, who will share a few words about the course and these institutions, following which we shall have a round of self-introductions. And finally, the inaugural remarks from Professor Paula Banerjee and Professor Ranabir. I would now request Dr. Samaddar to say a few words about CRG and the course. Over to you, Samaddar.
Thank you, Madhuvanti. I hope I can be heard by everyone. It is late in the afternoon, early evening in Calcutta, and we have an unexpectedly pleasant winter this time. So hope those of you who are not in such a pleasant climate, you are also having a great time. On behalf of the Calcutta Research Group, I'm really happy to welcome you to our online course on urban futures in South and Southeast Asia, which is the second online course that the Calcutta Research Group has organized on the idea of the city and the physical, material, economic, political transformations, pasts, presents, and futures of the city. To tell you a little bit about Calcutta Research Group, we are a research organization based in the city of Calcutta in India. We are around 28 years old, and since the very beginning, Calcutta Research Group has focused on migration and forced migration in the South Asian context. It has emerged from a group of peace builders who talked about peace and hosted the Pakistan-India People's Forum for Peace in the early 1990s, which is what led to the formation of the Calcutta Research Group. So peace studies, citizenship studies, conflict resolution, forced migration, refugee studies, study of statelessness and mobile populations, of urban transformation, of migrant workers, migrant labor, and increasingly new forms of governmentality, citizenship, new regimes of subjectivation, and new kinds of control, but also new forms of political and popular resistance are some of the areas that Calcutta Research Group is interested in. One of our founder members, Professor Ranabir Samaddar, is currently a fellow of the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, and with Professor Samaddar's fellowship, we have been investigating the humanities urban future, and we have also been organizing a series of events, lectures, and online courses dedicated to critically rethinking the idea of the city. Last year, we held our first online course in collaboration with the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, that is CIFAR. Our course was titled Making and Unmaking of Cities in South Asia. We have shared all the lectures that were part of this course in the Google Classroom. If you have joined it, you have already been able to see it. We also organized a series of lectures in and around the city of Calcutta, physical lectures. They were recorded and they were circulated under the title City Lights, which is also something that you can access. In our present course, the Urban Futures in South and Southeast Asia, we are extremely proud and happy to be collaborating with the Center for Gender and Displacement in Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok, and their various partners, which has resulted in a course which is, for us, quite impressive and quite happy, unprecedented in certain ways, because, as you know, given extremely uncertain times that we live in, we do not always get to talk to each other and interact with each other, but in collaboration with the AIT, we have managed to bring together from hundreds of applications that we very painstakingly sorted through, participants from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Iran, Italy, Mexico, Myanmar, Nepal, New Zealand, Philippines, and Thailand, which I hope also attests to the breadth of the kind of lectures that we are hoping to deliver. And we hope that all of these lectures will have something that each of you can take back with you. You've already seen the schedule. You know that the course lectures are divided into some themes. The themes are political histories of the subaltern classes and their resistance, their political practices, the experience of public disasters in cities, the literary, cultural, and artistic imaginations of a desirable city, the visions of planners and administrators, how they play out, the presence of refugees and migrants and how they countered nativist claims in a city, and the transformation of urban economy from an industrial to a post-industrial economy, etc. You've also seen that each of these themes will be approached from two distinct positions. So there will be two lecturers for each theme, one speaking about a South Asian city and the other speaking about Southeast Asian context. So hopefully you will find the course as fruitful as we found it when we designed it. A small note on the assignment, there have been some queries about it. There are two requirements to this course. One is a 75% attendance, and therefore if you have joined the online meeting with an acronym like VJML or something like user, please change it to reflect your own name. Otherwise, how will we know that you are in this class? So a 75% attendance. And second is an assignment. Do not worry about the assignment. It's a small creative assignment taking up any one of the themes in any one of the classes that you have attended. So last year we had people writing short stories, small reflective pieces, a photo essay. Some people submitted some videos. It could be a book review, something that helps you critically engage with either a specific city or the idea of a city, taking into account one of the themes from whatever is being discussed in the classes. The assignment will be due in the week before the final week of the course, and I just want to reiterate that the certification of the course is dependent on successfully submitting your assignment. It does not matter how great it is, but it has to be submitted. Finally, I also would like to remind you that you've seen that the course lectures are going to be recorded. By being present in this meeting, you're giving consent to being recorded for the course, which will be later circulated with you, but not during the course. So it takes us some time to process the video recording. And after the course, once the recordings are ready, Madhuvanti will very kindly, or CIFAR will very kindly share them with you. We will listen. I'll hand this over to my colleague, Dr. Priya Singh at the AIT, after which we will have a round of self-introductions. Kindly be very brief in your self-introduction. Just tell us your name, where you are from, and which association, institution, organization you are affiliated with. Over to you, Priya, and Madhuvanti will call out the names for the self-introduction.
Thank you so much, Shamata. Good evening. Once again, very warm welcome to all the participants. My name is Priya Singh and I represent the Center on Gender and Forced Displacement, which is one of the partnering organizations behind this workshop. The CGFD, as it is popularly known as, is a very recent research hub which was created as recent as 2023 with support from the IDRC, that's the International Development Research Center. And it was established, as you know, in the Asian Institute of Technology in Pathumthani in Thailand. What we essentially do is we look at, or we engage with rather, forced migration and displacement from a gendered perspective with a strong focus on urban spaces, on cities in South and Southeast Asia. We essentially look at how the vulnerable communities, how the marginal groups, the marginalized as such, live, work, negotiate, most importantly, create belonging in urban spaces. And as you can see, there is a strong connect with the themes that we will be discussing in this particular workshop. We're very happy to be a part of this partnership. Not only this workshop, but as a new center, we've tried to engage with, partner with senior organizations like the Calcutta Research Group organizing seminars, doing research workshops with them at AIT. So essentially what we do is we engage with or work on research, policy conversations, as well as teaching. And most of us at the Center on Gender and Forced Displacement are associated with the Calcutta Research Group in some capacity or the other. The founding director of the center, who's the IDRC Endowed chair, Professor Paula Banerjee, who will be speaking to us shortly, is also an intrinsic part of the Calcutta Research Group. So what we are essentially trying to do is emphasize on the connect, on the trans-regional connect, South and Southeast Asia. These are seamless flows of migrants, displaced people, and vulnerable groups that are compelled to move from one space or the other, making them a precarious group. And we shall be discussing them in urban spaces. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy the conversations out here, and I hope it's an enriching experience for all of you. Thank you very much. May I hand over the mic to Madhubunti, my colleague from Calcutta Research Group.
Thank you, Priyadi. Thank you, Shamadadi, for introducing the course and for introducing the institutions. I would now request Professor Paula Banerjee to deliver the introductory remarks for this course. If anyone has any questions on ma'am's lecture, you can please put them in the comment box and we will address them later. To introduce Professor Banerjee, Paula Banerjee is the IDRC Endowed Chair in Gender and Forced Displacement at the Asian Institute of Technology in Bangkok. Previously, she served as the President of the International Association for the Study of Forced Migration and the Chair of the Department of South and Southeast Asian Studies at the University of Calcutta, among several other distinguished academic and administrative positions in India and abroad. In 2013, she was awarded the Distinguished Fulbright SIR Award and a visiting professorship at the State University of New York at Oswego. She has written and edited over 15 books and monographs and has published widely in international journals such as the Journal of Borderland Studies, the Canadian Journal of Women's Studies, Post-Migration Review, and the Journal of International Studies. She has also been a visiting professor to the Helsinki University, Finland, Yunnan University in China, University of Paris 7 in France, and the New School, USA, and several others. Very warm welcome to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Madhubunti. Just one line would have done it. No worries. Since this is an introductory talk about urban future, critical urban studies, etc., these are the categories that we will be dealing with in this particular course. I will try to be very simplistic so that everybody, not everybody is from a background of urban studies here. I want this to be understandable for everybody who is present today. Firstly, a very warm welcome to you. This is an offshoot of two institutions coming together, CRG and AIT CGFT, Center for Gender and Forced Migration. I was very heartened to hear that some of you are from disaster management backgrounds. Some are working on refugees, because these are categories that are constantly appearing whenever you talk of the urban space. Now tell me something, is urban and city the same thing? How would you respond to that? Is urban space and city the same thing? What would you say? Just raise your hand if you want to respond. There is no wrong answer. The question can be completely wrong, but answers are fine, believe me. Can somebody say something? Is Mr. Sivanathan, is his hand raised? I can see his hand raised. Anybody with raised hands, I'm going to call upon. Mr. Selvakumar Sivanathan quickly switched himself off. Don't worry, if you don't want to respond. Yes, Ajmain.
Ajmain would like to respond.
Yes,
hello. Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, like from my understanding, so urban is like a broad term that also covers city. So like urban means an area or a region that is like that is distinct from rural areas. For example, like it has a built-in infrastructure. It is comparatively more densely populated, whereas a city is a specific type of urban area that refers to more of a larger established um, municipality with a specific amount of population or yeah, like that crosses a particular criteria and has a particular form of governance, if I'm not wrong.
Ajmin, Adil, Nakib, you have touched upon actually very important points. Urban is an open space, maybe built in, maybe not, but the characteristic of urban, very simply, is that it is densely populated. A city can be part of an urban area. A city is always part of an urban area, but urban actually is more than a city. Even, we call about, let's say, suburban. That is also an urban area, but that is not part of a city. So largely, urban contains quantitative things such as, the number of population, but it also contains qualitative things like, cultural centers, like museums, like educational centers, not always industrial centers, and certainly not agricultural centers. Now, we, like in spaces like Singapore and Dubai, we are developing a kind of urban agriculture, which is fairly a new concept. But, when in traditional ways you defined an urban center, it did not contain an agricultural sector. It contained parts of an industrial sector, but as I will explain later, it was largely a manufacturing center, a service center. Okay? The city, however, is primarily an administrative and a legal concept. The city actually always has a municipal government in it. You can vote for members governing the city. So governance becomes a very important part of a city. But always, we do not see that sort of stress on governance, on legality, when we are talking about urban. Okay? So primarily, the characteristic of urban is that it is a broader concept than city. Last year, we did a course that specifically concentrated on the city. Okay. This year, we are talking about the urban space. When I will go a little way into my talk today to make you understand what an urban space is, there I will talk about the importance of the suburban, especially if you look at gendered definition of an urban space from the global north. So we understand that an urban contains a city within it. Not always do cities contain the urban within it. Okay? So urban actually spills over from the city. It is not merely a city, it is broader than a city. Okay? Now, when we talked about city, couple of years back, there was a lot of concerns about the demise of a city, the destruction of a city. This actually is a very interesting phenomena because, again, a small question, if we divide the world into the global north and the global south, we associate always progress, modernization, etc., with the global north more than the global south. Isn't it right? However, if you look at the first 30 cities of the world, how many do you think are from the global north? And how many do you think are from the global south? Any of you will attempt to talk about that? The number of the most important cities of the world, where do they belong? Largely, very broadly, through broad sort of canvas. Where do cities belong? Do they belong in the global north? Or do they belong in the global south? The most important, the most populated, the most active cities of the world. Will somebody attempt to answer that?
May I?
Yes, of course.
I think largely the cities belong to the global south.
Yes. Thank you so much, Purna. I shouldn't have allowed you to speak. You are a faculty. But anyway, for those of you who are listening to the discussion, the cities from the global south are way bigger, way more important. 18 of the cities, of the first 30 cities, are from the global south, whereas only 12 are from the global north. So, if you come to Mumbai, Bangkok, Jakarta, all of these are really, really huge cities, huge cities. So that is why, overwhelmingly city making and that contributing to the urban space is becoming a question of the global south. Yet, what is happening also is that there is a depopulation from the cities of the global north. That is why, people, or discursively, people who are working on the cities are talking about the destruction of the city. One of the leading voices of that is somebody who I will name, and I'm sure all of you have read him, all of you have heard about him, and that is David Harvey. David Harvey, very interestingly, talks about the creative destruction of the cities. Cities like, let's say, from the global north, let me talk about Detroit. Detroit, or cities from the Rust Belt in the United States. We always think that United States is a very urban area, but actually it's not. But if you go to those cities, you will see there are large tracts where houses have broken window, nobody living on them, total depopulation from sectors. Parts of Detroit, particularly I remember this because Detroit at one time was a very, very thriving city with the automobile industry, the rise of the automobile industry. Today, there are belts which are completely without population. And it's decrepit centers. So that is why in the global north, we see this concern about cities and the death of the cities, and also that spills over to the urban space. Because when you are speaking from a cultural perspective, you wrongly conflate city with the urban. So that is why, there is this knee-jerk reaction and concern, because you see, what happens is that no matter what is happening in the global south, what happens in the global north actually gets the headline. The politics is made by the donor-driven world, and that is why when that concerns them, and scholars like David Harvey, who are celebrated, who are really wonderful scholars otherwise, talk about the destruction of the cities and the urban space. However, in the global south, if you look at the cities of Southeast Asia, South Asia, you will see that when the North is talking about the destruction of the cities, exactly at that time, cities are growing in huge numbers in the global South. And these cities, these spaces are characterized by certain things. One thing is that they're moving away from the agricultural sector and dominating, and the economy is being dominated by the manufacturing sector. And also with that, we see a movement away from ownership to renting. So it becomes a rentier space in houses, largely in the cities in Southeast Asia and Bangkok, etc. You don't own a house. You usually rent a house. And that is also something that, characterizes cities of the global South. In the global North, at the same time, or even before this, what was happening is that the more or less movement of certain races into the downtown area. So in the United States, in England, downtown was becoming largely very black, or black and brown and yellow, multicolored, whereas the suburbs were becoming white. So, this, thirdly, when you talk about urbanization, criticality of urbanization, this difference is often glossed over by scholars. Then we had another group of scholars who talked about this post-city phenomena in the urban futures. However, from our perspective, we cannot really talk about this post-city phenomena, because city is palpable. City is not characterized by what Harvey said, creative destruction. Now, Harvey had a problem. Why did he talk about creative destruction of cities? Because he said progressively what was happening in the cities is that the intellectual life was actually dying down in the city, in the global northern city. And it was moving to, a space like universities, etc., which was, not just part of the city. So in London, you have London School of Economics, but the traditional universities like Oxford and Cambridge was away from London. So the intellectual life was leaving from that particular space, and it was becoming more or less a space of the subalterns. That is not a terminology that was used by the discursive practices of the global North, but this is a term that I'm privileging, I'm using. So whereas, that is why what was happening is that, thank you so much. As a result of this, thank you, Hujat, for your nice comments. That gives a lot of energy to us. So what is happening in the process is that you have this subalternization of the cities, yet intellectuals are belonging to a class which is not subaltern. So we have to understand, just like policemen, constables, why are they sometimes associating with the mob? Because class-wise, they are the same background. So they have a specific understanding of the mob, which we lack. So, from the cities, we see this experience of the cities where it was becoming subaltern. Intellectuals were getting concerned about that. And the suburbans where that is why I said suburban is very, very important in the urban concept for the global North, because intellectual lives was going to these suburban spaces. This was also patriarchy was being played out, because men were going to the cities to work, and if they were of a certain class, of a certain race, largely the women were left behind in the suburban areas. So you have women being the princess or the queen of the houses in white picket fences, and you have men becoming the breadwinners, etc. But that was, absolutely going to change. We have the shop girls going into the cities, a new history where progressively women were going into the cities as consumers, then as workers. And when women and subaltern classes were entering the cities, then people like David Harvey were talking about the critical, destruction, the creative destruction, and the new birth. And in the suburbans, they were concerned with the corporatization of the intellectual life. So David Harvey was crying hoarse about the corporatization of geography, the corporatization of the urban, which is creating this decline in the understanding of the urban. Okay, so this is one scenario. The scenario from another scenario, what is the urban? If we talk about the intellectuals from the global south, they present the urban. You will listen to Professor Ranabir Samaddar very soon after this, but I don't know what he will talk about. We have no understanding of what he's going to talk about. We didn't consult, so I'm just going to give my spiel. And I feel that the urban that was being created in the global south consisted of two primary phenomena. It was partly a place, a space. As I told you, this urban contained the huge conglomerate cities and its sort of peripheries. In this urban, you have two distinct groups presenting two different phenomena. One phenomena was the fantasy of the urban. That was derivative from the global north. The urban was a space where people had lovely houses, where people made money. This was nothing. This was not a 20th century phenomena. Because if you look at the Bible, you have the understanding of the Tower of Babel, or Babel, or whichever way you pronounce it. So you have the Tower of Babel. If you look at Germany, sort of medieval Germany or early modern Germany, we have the understanding of Stadtluft not Fret, which is that city makes you free. This understanding of city making you free. Why do city make you free? Because when people who were slaves, they went to the city, they could demand freedom. So, you have this concept of this would later become very, very important. Cities, which were spaces of freedom. Today, New York is considered under Zohran Mamdani. New York is taken up this understanding of the city, where the citizen can make people who are non-citizens come into it and make them freer. So you became free if you entered the city space. Cities can also be city of asylum. This huge urban space can also be the urban center for asylum. So, so within the imagination of the urban, you had this concept of a fantasy where urban life could make you free. The other thing contained within the urban is the city. And the other, for example, fantasy that you had was not just the German, but also the Spanish fantasy. Spanish and see how interesting it is, because we talk about the global north and the imagination of the city, and the global south and the imagination of the urban. When the Spanish conquistadores went to the Americas to occupy the Americas, they were actually going there to ransack 7 golden cities of the Americas. So there was also, even at that time, an understanding that the so-called Americas, which is now represented by what we call the Latin America or the South America, etc., that region, that was also considered as the space of cities. And the golden cities belonged there, because city was a place where people could become anonymous, because, as I said, because of urbanity, it represented a huge density of population. So that is why for the global south, the city never died. The city, there was no need for the destruction. The city was always a fantasy land. But also, including within this fantasy is the fantasy of the subalterns becoming citizens. Okay, because the subalterns historically was always finding it very difficult to become citizens, and the subalterns, always occupied the peripheries within the global south cities and encroached within the cities. So whereas we had the fantasy of the cities, there was also um, a reality coming out from the knowledge of the city. And who produced that reality, the knowledge of the city? It was produced by the subalterns. And who formed these subalterns? Well, the migrants formed the subalterns who came from the rural areas into the urban spaces, and made it thriving. The refugees formed the subalterns within the space. They were, as I said, from the Middle Ages, trying to survive. So they were going to sanctuary places. Even if a city is not known as a sanctuary city, there is that characteristic of sanctuary cities. Even if a city is not known as sanctuary city, the population, the sort of concentration of population makes it anonymous. So a lot of the subalterns who were considered as non-free would become free in the cities. However, the city was always thriving center of people who gave, labor. So Manuel Castell, when he talked about the cities, he actually said that he actually mentioned urban spaces. He did not talk about the cities, so I'm not conflating that. But Manuel Castell in 1977, in his book on what he called the urban question, talked about that there's no urban. Urban doesn't exist. What exists is a conglomeration of the proletariat who was giving services and manufacturing goods for the richer classes. So what Castell was actually pointing out is this massive inequality within the urban space. That inequality was largely characteristic of the global north. The global south actually had a slightly different phenomena. Yes, the proletariat, the group that produced labor, and I will also talk about this group, which was producing what is known as the intimate labor or physical labor, including sex worker, including domestic worker, including care worker. They were coming into the city, and many of them were women. So they were also changing the gender dynamics within the city. Because before I told you, the city was a masculine space, but it is the subaltern groups. And if you look at census data, you will always see that typically in the 70s and 80s, there are more men in the city than women. Whereas in the 90s, it is slowly beginning to change because the proletariat class or the working class or the labor class, their gender was changing. Their gender was becoming more sort of equal with that, the masculine and the feminine were coming together. And the feminine, I'm not saying that in terms of rights or in terms of, respectability or in terms of what they could extract from the city, the men and the women were same. But in this process of extraction by the upper classes, huge groups of population were becoming resourceless, or as Foucault has taught us, there's nothing called resourceless or powerless. Less in power would be a better terminology. But they were also fighting for their rights to the city. So cities were palpably the contest areas within the urban space where the rights to political power was being fought out by the subalterns and by the middle classes. And within the subalterns, the leadership was largely given by women, by migrants, by refugees. Even within India, in the autonomous movements, you have the trade unions, the women's rights, the nationality rights, the refugee rights, the migrant rights groups that were contesting. So an urban space is something, according to me, that is Paula Banerjee, who is saying is a space where there is this very active contest between the different classes of people acquire the right to survive. We acquire the right to freedom. We acquire the right to identity. And this is making a huge gender sort of a revolutionizing the notion of gender, because in the public sphere of this urban space, the battle of gender is being fought out. And it is not a battle between masculine and feminine. There are so many other genders within it that is also in this contest. And this contest is also being played out in the sector of intimate labor, because you have men now also getting into nursing, and they were much smaller in number before COVID into nursing. COVID showed us that women were inevitably more in number and also repressed because of their care duties. And one of the reasons why women could not be as high achieving as the men is because they were stymied by family duties, by care duties, by reproductory duties. So these battles today are fought out in the urban sphere. When we talk about the urban future, we talk about a continuation of these contests, but also an understanding that survival are always fought through these contests. So crisis does not automatically mean destruction. Cities are not dying. Urban centers do not, become centers of death. That is only in the global north, where we are existing, where we are living. These are still thriving spaces. Logistically, it is becoming different. Contests are appearing, but there's nothing to worry about contests, because contests are actually because of that fantasy of survival. So that is why according to me, there is an urban future, but, there are different definitions of urban futures, and you will have Amin and other scholars in this. And it's very important to understand that the reality of urban futures is represented also by the people who belong to the so-called subaltern class, Gramscian mode, and they are women, they are migrants, they are refugees. So if we talk of cities and urban spaces only in terms of logistics and spaces and temporality, we will completely miss the vibe of the city. What is this logistical space? It is the spaces where people exist, where people make it thriving. And it is the place where people dream, people fight, people contest so that they can survive. Thank you so much. Madhubanti?
Thank you so much for that very engaging, very insightful talk, ma'am. Thank you for providing us with some very useful frameworks to look at contemporary urban questions. I'm sure it has been very helpful for everyone. If there are any questions,
is Ranabir here? That is a more important question.
Yes, he is here.
Okay.
So does anybody have any questions? You can put them in the comment box, or now you can even raise your hands.
No, actually, ma'am, I don't have any question. Actually, thank you so much for a brief explanation, and also I really appreciate with ma'am explanation. So thank you.
Thank you, Abdurrahman.
So if there are no questions.
Hi, am I audible? I couldn't find like hand raised, so I just
it's
unmuted
Right, so
myself.
we will take exactly 2 questions. We'll take this one, and Ajmain has a question. After that, we'll move on to Ranabir.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor Banerjee. It was really insightful and also quite like, as Madhuvanti said, provided insight to look at these concepts. I just wanted to understand when you said like in global north, and as Harvey has said, like there's some kind of like creative destructions of the cities and demise of the cities, whereas in global south, cities are emerging, growth. I also wanted to understand if there's any relation between these cities from the global north and the global south. One, there's dying and there's emergence and the growth, because in my understanding, because in industries, manufacturings were also like, dying in cities, as you mentioned in Detroit, whereas those labors were being taken from these cities in global south became the center for the manufacturers and labor. Yeah.
Okay, I will talk about it. Can we take Ajmain's question and take it together? Because after this, you have Ranabir, who's an expert on this issue, and I don't want to delay his lecture. So Paris, I will definitely come to this question. Ajmain, why don't you come and say what you have to say?
Yes, thank you so much. I just need some clarification regarding the two phenomena that you talked about, and like the two fantasies that you talked about, the Spanish one and the German. I quite didn't really the Spanish fantasy roots back to its colonial past, but I didn't fully understand the German fantasy that you talked about. Would it be possible to just clarify it?
Of course. You see, the German fantasy was that this was a space for freedom. Cities were a space for freedom, and there was a route, through different cities. And many of these cities were considered as sanctuary cities. And these were the places where not just, people who were trading, or not just slaves, even Martin Luther went for sanctuary. So cities were considered as a space for freedom. However, what happened over the time is that when the number of these groups of people who entered the cities kept increasing, the right to freedom within the city became ephemeral. So, by the time we come to the modern period, the city was progressively becoming a repressive center. That concept of liberty, that concept of independence, that sort of fired the imagination of city at during the Middle Ages, was becoming less and less. So that was it. And Paris, yes, of course, the cities of the global north also has effects of the cities of the global south. For example, Maduro was taken away from Venezuela by, Donald Trump. And what was happening is that not just the city, but also what was, not just the urban centers, but also what was happening was that there was this control of the North over the petrochemical industry as a result of that. There already was a control, but this control now became more and more severe. And all the cities which were depending, my dear friend, Professor Shalini Randeria, who is an expert in this, was talking about Ahmedabad. I was telling her that Maduro's capture by Trump did not really affect Calcutta or Kolkata. But she was saying that no, Ahmedabad is severely affected by that. So yes, the economy of the global north does affect the global south tremendously, not just the city, but the economy, which is part New York business, the stopping of, where are USAID offices? They are in the cities. The stopping of funding by Donald Trump, which is a very city-oriented phenomena, has tremendous effect on cities in the global south. So yes, it does have punitive effects. It does, there are connections, but the history of the growth of the two different cities in the two different regions, this is a very broad generalization. situation, you can pick parts of France from it and say, hey, it's not happening here. I'm generalizing so that, you have an understanding. This is your space from where you begin the understanding and see that the development of the cities in Southeast Asia, where we are, or South Asia, where most of us are from South and Southeast Asia, where that is happening, that history is different from the cities of the global north. And that is why discourses on these two different urban spaces is also very different. Thank you. Thank you, Madhuvanti, Shamota, Priya, CIFAR.
Thank you, ma'am. I think Ajman had a question, or?
Oh, yeah, it has been answered.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? If not, we shall move on now to Professor Ranabir Samaddar's introductory remarks for the course. To introduce him, Professor Samaddar is currently the Emeritus Professor at Calcutta Research Group and a Fellow of the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, CIFAR. He belongs to the critical school of thinking and is considered to be one of the foremost theorists in the field of forced migration studies. He has worked and taught extensively on issues of forced migration, nationalism, and post-colonial statehood in South Asia, and new regimes of technological restructuring and labor control. The much acclaimed Politics of Dialogue was a culmination of his long work on justice, rights, and peace. Some of his recent works include Biopolitics from Below, Crisis, Conjuncture, and Rupture, 2025, Pandemic and the Politics of Life, published in 2021, and The Accumulation of Post-Colonial Capitalism, published in 2020. Welcome, Professor Samaddar.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Is okay, no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Friends, dear participants, so you have heard from Professor Paula some of the essentials on regarding, let's say, thinking from a Southern point of view, on the question of urban future. I shall continue the discussion along the same line, and Professor Paula has discussed quite a bit of things. I did not get to hear the complete, lecture, but whatever I heard, I could see that she has anticipated some of the things that I would have said. So I will, those things I will not repeat, but take them as also those observations or analysis are detoured by me. I shall refer to few other questions and maybe approach the whole thing of urban question from 2-3 other perspectives and see how it stands. And as I said, that since she has already anticipated a number of points, so I shall speak for maybe 25-30 minutes and then maximum, and then if there is discussion following my presentation, it would be good. We can then further explicate the discussion and or clarify if there is any need for clarification. When we speak of urban future, clearly we are speaking of future. So there is a question of time, and the issue of time is not raised here in abstraction. So we are not discussing future in general, but we are discussing what will be the future of our cities. And we are also discussing what will be the future trajectory of what we understand by urban. And I would not go into the discussion of what we mean by urban. Professor Paula has discussed a little bit on that. And I do not know, but probably Madhuvanti would be able to tell you. I had previously, I think, published a small article called The Urban Turn. I don't know whether Madhuvanti has uploaded it for your consultation. If she has not, then I request her to.
I have.
You
I have, sir.
Okay, very good. So the how the idea of the urban evolved over time is there, and please go through that so that we don't have to repeat that. But suffice it to say that the question of time, and time meaning urban time, is invites us to think of temporality in a particular way or in a critical way. By temporality, we mean how time plays its part in the evolution of the urban. And is the urban time something very specific? Or is it like time in the villages, time in the cities? Is time everywhere the same? You have a very famous essay by the British historian E.P. Thompson on how the beginning of capitalism and the beginning of industrial economy, factories, railways, etc. And he was speaking of factories, how industrial capitalism, industrialism or industrial revolution introduced a concept of time that was different from the time of which the people of the Middle Ages, particularly the peasants, had a particular notion. So you may read E.P. Thompson's writing. There is also a famous writing, unfortunately I have forgotten the names of these essays, but there is a very famous writing by Mark Bloch on how time passed in the villages in 12th and 13th century France. It's a poetic article, and you can read. It's a description of from some of the church accounts and some of the administrative accounts of revenue officials of those days. There is also a writing in Jadunath Sarkar's writing on medieval Bengal, where again where Emperor Shah Jahan's governor in Bengal, when he was sent, he found a distinct approach to the question of time by the Bengal villagers. So time is particular, and urban time in that sense has its components, features like not only attendance, the last author, meaning the last author, Jadunath Sarkar, the historian of medieval India, Mughal India. So you have components of urban time marked by attendance according to regular schedules to schools, colleges, factories, offices. But you have also the daily time, the monthly time, and the annual calendar marked by events, festivals, entertainment activities, and many other things. But now you have also a much greater and unimaginable flexibility, unheard of in the rural life also of Middle Ages or contemporary age, where the office time, the home time, they are all mixed up, working from a distance. So time is, in that sense, heterogeneous in the city. But time is heterogeneous in one more way. The way in which towns or cities in India were brought up by their jackboots to modernity by colonialism is not the way in which factories updated cities in the West, or the way in which a railway town, or let us say port town, or an industrial town observes its time is not the same in which a cosmopolitan town, or not, it's not the right word, but rather a metropolitan town or a metropolitan city bides its time. So there is the question of temporality, but temporality means something else also. How do you think of the urban future? Does it depend on our imagination only? It of course depends on how we want to imagine our future. But how we want to imagine our future, which will lend strength to our working towards a desirable urban future, an urban future which you would all like, also depends on what we do at the present moment. So our future making practices are happening in our time. So suppose a flyover is being constructed or an expressway is being constructed from two big cities of India, from Delhi to Mumbai. And this expressway, when completed, will, let us say, will change the future of commerce and trade between the two cities. Also, the way in which towns will proliferate or emerge along the two sides of the expressway. So you can see future is being shaped by contemporary time. So in many sense, we may say that urban future is being determined by, or influenced by, or shaped by the future making dynamics of the present. And in some sense, probably therefore our grandparents and parents were wiser when they used to caution us to do this or not to do that, because on that would depend how our health or how our future would take shape. Given that the cities of South Asia and Southeast Asia, many cities, not Bangkok, because Bangkok was never in that sense colonized, but cities of, let us say, Pakistan, India, or cities of the Middle East, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, these were all colonized cities. Philippines. And these cities were shaped or reshaped by centuries-long colonial rule. And the essentials of colonial rule in terms of dividing the city along racial lines, in terms of segregating public health facilities, in terms of, as you may call, entire range of urban experiences, the city had within it 2 or 3 cities. In many ways, therefore, the colonial city reflected many of the medieval cities where immigrants or even the city population were segmented and quartered in different sections of the city according to race or places of origin or countries or regions of origin, etc. And then decolonization happened. Decolonization could not completely undo, or probably never wanted to, or it was not possible also to undo the colonial history and the colonial imprint on the city. So you may find in post-colonial cities a mix of the colonial past and the post-colonial present in terms of economy, territorial structure, communication structure, language, medium of communication, etc. And colonization has been an important element in what we call the southern urbanization. So, in discussing then the temporality of the city, urban temporality, we can in brief then say 2 things. One is that city is actually a palimpsest. It is a palimpsest of histories and experiences, one on the top of other. And to understand how the future will be made in these cities, one of the keys to such an understanding will be to make sense of the palimpsest which the city is, and therefore how history works in the making of our time and the future time will be important. Even though we have to remember that this history of the city essaying into an unknown future which we are trying to shape according to our desires, this history is not a continuous history. It has its fair share of continuities and discontinuities, or continuities and breaks. Some of the critical breaks, or some of the very crucial breaks in the history of the city, come in the wake of what we call urban crisis. If you have read Michel Foucault's Security, Territory, Population, you will see that Foucault there argues that it was a conjuncture of 3 important factors. One is the awareness of the need for security as distinct from discipline and control. Security, which means you anticipate a danger and take preventive precautionary steps territory, that you have to organize or give shape to a territory so that there is flow of commerce, flow of population, laborers can stay, administrative headquarters can be situated side by side with economic activities and commercial headquarters. But equally or more importantly, city is a city only when city's populations, city's subjects are not merely citizens, as Professor Paula was mentioning, rights-bearing individuals, but they are also populations. In other words, they are subjected to government's control in terms of their daily life, how they will grow as individuals will no longer be an individual problem, but a problem of the collective known as people, but now being turned into population, in other words, targets of governmental strategies in terms of managing society. And Foucault used a term, very interesting term, on which not much, I think some attention has been paid, but probably much more attention needs to be paid, and Foucault never explained it. But the term is very crucial, which is, the phrase is historical intelligibility. How does the future of a city become historically intelligible? A city is supposed to escape history. It is the future. It is not history. But on the other hand, how do we understand history? Because we all understand history according to our, we all understand future according to our own histories, according to how we have grown up, how we have become what we are. And this understanding is defined by Foucault as by the phrase historical intelligibility. How does something become intelligible in the lens of history? But this history, as I said, is not one of only continuity, but a combination of continuities and discontinuities. So Schumpeter, the great economist, liberal economist Schumpeter, expressed the same thing, but from a bourgeois point of view, which is that markets will be destroyed, and from there new economic impulses will begin. And David Harvey had it from Schumpeter, his idea of creative destruction. But in any case, what we have to know here is that urban crises happened like great riots, great earthquakes, plagues and other infamous disasters of unimaginable magnitude, where you see that the present formation of the city is broken, and the city in a way begins a new life. So in that sense, we can say that the break comes, and the idea of the break again comes from the specific school of historians who think in terms of discontinuities, who thought in terms of longue durée history. The break comes in the wake of a conjuncture of certain forces, events, an ensuing crisis, and its resolution. In this reshaping of the city, one more thing should be kept in mind, which is that if temporality is fractured or is rendered heterogeneous, that time is not homogeneous, but it is heterogeneous by the differential time and the differential existences of differential existences, then we must also understand that within the city also, time does not play in the same manner. In Islam, in the fast-moving compartment or a wagon of a metro, and a person walking, the times are different. Crucial would be to understand, therefore, that is the city, therefore, one single homogeneous monolithic territory, or the city as a territory is fractured and made of several segments? As you can well understand the answer, that it is made of several segments. The workers' quarter, what is called the central business district, what is known as the suburbia, what is known as the outlying areas, the slums, the middle class residences, they are not seen. In some cities, there is a great mixture of these, as this city where I am now, Calcutta, Kolkata, is mixed, but many other cities are not that mixed. Earlier, we had a different notion of what was called the inner city, and there is a very well-known book on inner city by Paul Harrison. But the inner city has moved out, and Louis Mumford used a word, I don't know whether he was the first one to coin it. He took inspiration from the old Greek history, and the word is necropolis. That people, when they know that the city is in danger, it could be for plague, it could be due to outbreak of repeated fire, it could be for invasion or impending invasion, attack on the city. People want to leave the city and settle outside. Or the city itself turns into the polis, that is the city of death, necropolis. So it becomes kind of an inner city, including increasing immiserization and ghettoization of the city space. Or the earlier residents of inner city now move to outside because of high rent and many other things, or work opportunities which are at a different place. In any case, it is important to know that the city is not a continuing free flow territory, flowing territory. The city is a discontinuous territory, and therefore the city is marked with corridors. So when you imagine the city, you cannot imagine a city without roads and streets, lanes and bylanes, avenues. But you have, these are all part of the imagination of the city. And corridors, zones, these are all essentials of the latest imaginary of the city. Now they all indicate that the city at our time, in this time, is being reshaped by logistical activities, which would include building of new infrastructure, material infrastructure. But cities had social infrastructure for a long time. Schools, hospitals, these are all parts of social infrastructure. The only difference is that now, as distinct from the colonial time, post-colonial governments, citizens, city bodies like municipalities, corporations, they are all now giving emphasis on the improvement of social infrastructure and not leave it behind while focusing on logistical reorientation of the city. And Professor Paula was indicating to the one-eyed nature of the analysis of northern scholars. Here is one more example relating to this. Read a famous book. It later on became a book, but it began with an article, the idea, by the famous historical sociologist Saskia Sassen. And Saskia Sassen, in this book, Global City, as I said that I think in your suggested readings, probably she has an article. Madhuvanti, you have included it, no? The article
Yes,
by...
sir. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So please read that. It's not a big, long article. And there Saskia Sassen analyzes the composition of three cities, New York, London, and Tokyo, and says how these three cities are global. And by global, she means that the city reshapes itself in a way, these global cities, where many of the activities are hollowed out, they are parceled off, decommissioned, or ancillarized and sent to other secondary cities. But these cities thrive on global connections. E-commerce, many other connections, information connections, connections of command and control. And most important, the legal basis of running these cities is also founded on, or the basis is on, a legal template which is developed in these global cities. And nowhere you can run a city without its due share of professionals, legal consultants, managerial experts, techno advisors, whose knowledge is modeled along the line of managing New York or London or Tokyo. Great example would be, once again, extended metropolitan authorities or modern communications and transport setup, etc. Yet, this idea of Saskia Sassen has been challenged, and it has been shown by many, including our own work, that cities like Mumbai or Chennai or Chittagong, Kolkata, Bangkok, Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, Karachi, Beirut, these great southern cities are all port cities, logistical cities, Alexandria, Kinshasa, that these cities are huge cities and they are all thriving, as Professor Paula partly said, due to migrant labor from the villages. But migrant labor comes and gets jobs precisely because these cities are now connected to the entire world. There is a very good book by one of my colleagues. The name of the book is Mumbai, the Global City, I think from Dharav Islam to, I'm again forgetting the name of the full name of the book. It has been written by Marie what's the name, full name? Again, you will find it. I have given references to that. I think the name of the book is Mumbai, the Global City, or Dharavi, the Global City. And there she shows that this huge sprawling slum, supposedly not only a mega slum, but probably the largest slum in Asia, it is called, I don't know, that in this slum, the way activities go on, from waste reprocessing to some of the latest ancillary work of manufacturing to small e-commerce activities, all those things combined with different communities staying in this slum, you have the real form of the 21st century global city. So you have a logistical reorientation. And at the same time, as Paula was mentioning, new towns are coming up, and new towns are not only smart towns, but probably amidst this built up craze about smart towns, we have forgotten possibly equally important certainly, but possibly more important, the emergence of what is in India called the census towns. Now, earlier the definition was that population over 5,000 people will be considered a census town. So if you have 7,000, now the figure has been revised upwards, so 10,000. And you can see that how urbanization is proceeding to a great extent. There are numerous writings on how the Indian growth story is marked by the activities in these census towns. Census towns are, in a way, the bridge between the classical villages and the classical cities. And they have the typical forms of labor, which are part urban and part rural. This takes us to my last but one point, which is that cities are witnessing, therefore, new forms of labor. These new forms of labor are often precarious. They are not like the labor that was performed in the factories in the olden times. They are not marked by standardized, contractualized wages and work hours. And these new forms of labor are also new forms in the sense that they take new material form in terms of production, small scale, small forms of transport, etc. Digital labor, information labor, construction labor in a new way, and much of this labor is performed by migrant labor. These migrants are coming from villages. At times, they go back to cities seasonally, annually. But increasingly now, they go back maybe after 2-3 years. And if they get jobs abroad in the Gulf or elsewhere, probably they come once in 3-4 years. The logistical reorientation of the cities also creates what has been called subaltern logistics. So everywhere, or more and more, I shouldn't say everywhere, but more and more villages are connected with dusty roads. It's not that you have to wade through lush greenfield or, agricultural fields to reach your village. You find dusty roads almost everywhere. You find three-wheelers and other modes of transport everywhere. You find corner shops where from the villages, people who are coming to the cities and returning at 10 at night may buy a few things. You may find labor also very much in new form in what are now called the giant multiplexes, supermarkets, etc. But the new form of labor is also found in the increasing number of care centers, whether they are hospitals or daycare centers, care centers of the kids, care centers of old and infirm people. You have a huge expansion of care services, in many cases public health services, and these care work has also expanded, therefore, the notion of care. Care is no longer associated with the nurses or old women at home, but they are also, in a way, as you found in the COVID time, that even the street police who were helping you in getting your daily vegetables in the COVID time when there was lockdown everywhere, that they were also called the frontier care workers. So you have care services, but you have also protection services. And again, protection is not only protection of refugees and migrants, protection for the ordinary city people. And there is an enormous expansion of the protection services. In fact, in India, I will tell you and conclude maybe with another 2-3 minutes on a very funny small news item. A few days back, I read in the newspaper that the city councillor in Calcutta, in one of the wards, the councillor who was known to look after her city, this lady, she was a municipal councillor who was working hard for supply of drinking water in adequate quantity to the people of her ward. She now wants that there should be light, electric light, that the dingy small lens in the ward should be adequately lighted up, and she wants CCTVs installed. So you get back, or you are reminded of something that I began with, the question of security. And security and protection, they have become important. If you take the example of working women in a city, you can see protection is not only utmost in the rulers' minds, because they have to manage the city, but it is also utmost in the minds of family elders, whether they are mothers or fathers, guardians, also in the collective psyche of the women workers and child workers themselves. So the future of public power, the city represents public power, even though in America, many of the cities are being privatized, with all the services being maintained or given by the private agencies. But the city is essentially the place of public power. And this public power, the future may be, the desirable future would be that it moves more and more from being a vertical formation of power to a formation of power where the horizontal solidarities and the vertical formation of power, they are combined and they sit in dialogic relation with each other. And only such a power in a future city can effectively negotiate the dynamics of ecological challenges and the economic challenges that face the cities of our time. Thank you. I took half an hour. I thought I would finish by 10 minutes back.
Thank you so much, Professor Samaddar, for that wonderful lecture. When you began, I was thinking of Calvino's Invisible Cities. Actually, it was remind the way you were talking about time and how different times exist in the city. That was reminding me of Calvino's Invisible Cities, actually. But yeah. If anybody has any questions for Professor Samaddar, could you kindly raise your hands or put them in the comment box? Also, while you type your questions, if there are any questions, I would like to mention that we have already uploaded all the readings that Professor Samaddar mentioned and other readings as well that he has prescribed for this course. We have uploaded everything on the Google Classroom. Many of you have still not joined the Google Classroom, so we would request you to kindly join it by today. All the readings of future classes as well will be uploaded there, and we will also keep updating you there. So it would be very helpful if you could kindly join the classroom today. If you cannot join with your institutional IDs, please use a non-institutional email ID.
Thank you so much, Lumen. Thank you so much, Professor, for your excited history, and excited lecture, and also I'm glad to see you. Where I'm really appreciate your smart explanation. And also, I got the Google Classroom material, and so thank you.
Okay, so there's a question from Ishita Dostidar. She says, since I live in Dhaka city, how do I view or define Dhaka in the context of a global urban city?
It is global. It is global and urban city. That's all. Dhaka's Dhaka's garment industry is the most global. Dhaka sends and Bangladesh sends from Dhaka migrant workers all around the globe to Middle East and all that. It is global.
Ishita, would you like to respond to that? You can unmute yourself and respond to it. Okay, if there are no further questions, we will move to the last bit of today's session. I take that there are no other questions.
There is no other question. However, I would like to comment and piggyback on what Ranabir said to Ishita. Ishita, if you have not lived in the West, you haven't seen what I have seen. I have lived in the West for about 20 plus years. And every time I went shopping, I would lift up a piece of clothing and it would be made in Bangladesh. So, so it is very global. Dhaka, I don't know whether it was, produced in Dhaka or not, but yes, that would be the case.
Can you hear me? I want to say something here because Dhaka is also experienced so many destructions in these years, because very recently we experienced the plane crash in Dhaka city in a school actually. So how can you actually define these incidents, destructions regarding this global urban city, these things? Thank you.
So what? Global city does not witness destruction. Gaza has been destroyed. Was it not global? In fact, it was too much global.
Ranabir, can I come in here for just a minute?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Ishita,
Yes.
the marker of a global city is that it breathes through crisis. It lives through crisis.
Exactly.
So, it is it is never free of crisis. But that crisis is something, but that crisis also doesn't become commonplace. I'm not saying that people don't understand its crisis. It's a city is made of people. So
Yes.
crisis is another challenge to sort of get over and harness. So that is why when we talk about climate change and say that Dhaka will go underwater, it doesn't matter. The spirit of the people will make sure that Dhaka persists somewhere else.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, Chaumutati.
I wanted to ask Ranabir, but also to tie in, reflect on the composition of the class that we have today. So, Ranabir, when we were listening to people introduce themselves, we were very touched to find out that there are many participants who are from Myanmar and are now living in the world's largest refugee camp. And they have taken the trouble to join us from their homes in the refugee camps. And I was thinking of two things. One, I know that our friend Shucharita, who's present in the meeting today, in the class today, has elsewhere, maybe a year ago, talked about the camp as a city. And with that, I'm also thinking of your idea of a global city and how, if a global city is built on connections, then a camp is also a global city. So I was wondering whether you would like to think a little bit about that.
Two responses. One is that, and which will require a related but a really long discussion, that the city increasingly looks like a camp and the camp increasingly looks like a city. So the way in which the city is securitized, the way in which city is policed, surveillance goes on, informality and formality, formal and informal, they sit side by side and the huge, how would you put it, the punitive nature of the settlement, which a camp is. You have there, you have all these things in the making of many of the cities where large sections of populations will be at the receiving end of punitive power. On the other hand, big camps look like increasing cities, and camps are certainly like townships. If they are not cities, they can be called like towns. And Shucharita has visited these towns. They are even greater when you go to some of the towns in Turkey, near Istanbul, and certainly in Africa. Darfur again is a huge settlement of IDPs and refugees, but primarily IDPs. But at another level, yes, these are global connections, and but maybe we would be stretching our imagination, Shamata, a little more than warranted at this stage to call the city, call the camp a global city, but we can certainly take note of the similarities. I think what is important is to understand that the push behind the massive urbanization of the world is coming from the southern world. And as I showed earlier, that 13 of the 20 biggest cities of the world today are situated in the south. And in south, I am taking the liberty, of course, of including China, which probably has escaped or has transcended this division of the north and the south. And China has, in these 20 city list, China has 3. India also has this dubious distinction of 3 almost unmanageable cities, Delhi, Mumbai and Kolkata. But you have other cities. What I wanted to say was that all these cities, they have refugee camps, migrant camps. They live in camp-like condition, and therefore big cities having settlements that inherit the nature of camps, that now is a known phenomenon.
Thank you, Professor. Are there any other questions?
I'm tired. There were so many questions.
Okay. So if there are no other questions, we are at the end of the inaugural session of the online course. Thank you to everyone who made this possible and successful. So we are deeply grateful to Professor Ranabir Samaddar and Professor Paula Banerjee for sharing their very insightful and thought-provoking inaugural remarks, which has so set the tone for the course. And it has offered us rich frameworks to think about the urban and contemporary urban questions. I would also like to sincerely thank Dr. Shamata Biswas and Dr. Priya Singh for their invaluable support in coordinating the course. We would like to also extend our sincere appreciation to IDRC and CIFAR, who are our partners who have supported us and made this course possible. We also obviously thank AIT and CRG, the Center for Gender and Forced Displacement at AIT and CRG for organizing this and for the institutional support. Finally, I would like to express my thanks to my colleagues, Sifa and Rajat Kanti Shur, for all the tech support and for coordinating the course and everything else. Thank you to the participants for joining us. Again, I would like to remind you to kindly join the Google Classroom as soon as possible, because we have already shared a lot of articles there and some of the articles that were mentioned in today's lectures as well. So yeah, see you next Saturday. Thank you and bye-bye.